it's Chris Ciulla from Leonardo Audio. We are at the Rockwell Theater, Davis Square, Somerville, Massachusetts. And it's a really great day today because we're starting our Origin series. This is going to be a series that we have on YouTube that delves into the auditory storytells that we are producing and publishing, and about the wonderful people that help us make these projects. So today, as a gem of our first episode here, we have a Boston Globe reporter with us, and she has written several true crime novels, including Boston Organized Crime, Gangland Boston, the upcoming Four on the Floor, which is about the murders that took place in Charlestown at the 99 restaurant, which happened in my youth and was a bit harrowing. And also our current topic, Dropkick Murphy, A Legendary Life, which we created a wonderful audiobook with, and it was a really wonderful experience. Without further ado, Emily Sweeney.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for being here. And, our production for this audiobook was really, was a perfect example of wonderful teamwork. You were able to come in and record some sections for us. We got Ken Casey of the Dropkick Murphys to come in and record some sections for us. And you gave me wonderful ammo so that I could do a good job on the bulk of that book and to do justice to it, because it really is a wonderful storyteller that you've created. So my first question to you is, why Dropkick Murphy? What brought you to his storytell? Was it that you did an article about him in the past, or were you a fan of the band and you were just kind of curious, how'd they get his name?
Yeah. So, I've always been, born and raised in Boston. Automatically, I guess that makes me a Dropkick Murphys fan.
Sure.
Growing up, always loved their music. And it wasn't until I moved out to the suburbs, I moved out to Littleton, right?
Okay.
And so I was at this restaurant nearby called Crossroads in Acton. And a lot of customers I could overhear talking about Dropkick Murphy.
Okay.
So at first, of course, I think, the band. And I'd heard vague, history of, him being, a professional wrestler, him being a real guy. But I never really looked into it much. And so, at Crossroads, I asked people, I was like, hey, you guys talking about Dropkick Murphy a lot. And they're like, yeah, he used to live, down the street. He had a farm here. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, Davis Road, 2 miles down. And so, of course, I, went down to Davis Road, checked it out, and I began, a huge mission to find out as much as I could about, this man and this farm, that he ran.
So pure curiosity to start.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So,
very cool.
at first, I didn't know if it would be a book, right? I thought, maybe this is a cool story,
Okay.
For the Globe. But
That's interesting anyways, that whether or not it's going to be just an article, or whether or not you've got enough ammo there, enough content for a full book.
Exactly, and I had no idea, what I could find out. Some of the folks at Crossroads were really nice enough to introduce me to some of Dropkick Murphy's children.
Okay.
And, they really held keys to, his whole story, and not his whole story, though. They had the perspective of a kid, you know what I mean? And Dropkick Murphy obviously ran a farm for, alcoholics to dry out. So there were a lot of other hidden stories that, even, Dropkick's children didn't know. And so what I did over the next, several years was try to dig up as much as I could and find out as much as I could about what happened there.
So how did you then get to Ken Casey writing the foreword for it? So that's the interesting thing is so as you did your research, when did the band start to come into view for it?
Actually, right from the beginning.
Okay, cool.
Because I'd written about the Dropkick Murphys before for the Globe, and when I was really started doing serious research, I got in touch with Ken. And, I told him how I was in touch with the Murphy family. And he'd been introduced to the Murphy family too, but he wasn't aware of the whole history of the farm in Acton. And I told him what I was doing. I really want to do a biography of Dropkick Murphy. And Ken was like super supportive, you know, and again, this took years, you know what I mean? So like, you know, years went by, I'd touch base with Ken, let him know how it was going. And then finally, when, you know, the book finally came out, it was about to, you know, I was like, hey, Ken, like, would you want to do the foreword for the book? Because you know, it was definitely going to include Ken in there. I had interviewed him about it.
Sure.
And he's like, sure. And actually, I was like blown away. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, like I never would I thought like Ken Casey would be like doing
Sure.
the forward to my book. I'm so honored. You know what I mean? I still can't believe it. And so yeah, he was nice enough to do the forward, and it really added to the book and you know what I mean, his perspective, because obviously they've you know, carried Dropkick Murphy's name for so long and made him famous to a whole new generation. Multiple generations, you know, of people.
So in Dropkick Murphy's story, so when did you get to the point where it was like, okay, this is definitely a book? What were the things that you learned about him that definitely were like, okay, this isn't just an article. This we've got a book here.
Yeah. So and for your viewers, right? So Dropkick Murphy, a lot of people have heard of the band, right? Dropkick Murphy was a real guy. Okay. Turns out he was a physician. He went to medical school. He was a professional wrestler. He actually he was wrestling at night, going to medical school during the day, which I thought was amazing, you know. So this is like the 30s that he gets started in his wrestling career. And he continues wrestling through the 40s, or up until, through the 40s. And in 1940, he buys some land out in Acton. This is where he opens up his farm. It's called Bellows Farm, and it's a sanitarium for, like, you know, alcoholics to come dry out. And he also built this amazing state-of-the-art gymnasium where professional athletes would come out and train, and also the general public. So this is like in the 1940s, he was like offering like personal training. Yeah, like have a gym membership.
Sure.
You know, and so he was really ahead of his time and helped so many people, and there were just like so many different facets to it. And I still think it would be a great like movie or scripted series, just because so many people came through there, and they each had like their own different stories and interactions with each other. Some crazy stuff went down, as you can imagine. When you have like a bunch of guys who are like, you know, getting off the booze, you can only imagine, you know, people are sneaking stuff in. And then you have Dropkick Murphy's family living there, so there are children, you know, running around the property. And I just thought, like, wow, this is like amazing. It's almost like too much, you know what I mean? Like too much for an article. There's got to be a book or a movie. And so that's when I really, you know, really dug down and tried to find out as much as I could.
Sure. For me, when I was prepping the book and then narrating it, it was the understanding that he was truly a sober house pioneer. You know, that to me was when you read it, it's how important that is in that the evolution of that world to get people help. You know, it was just a jet. That was what put it over the hump for me.
Yeah. I mean, he's been compared to, like, you know, running like the Betty Ford Clinic before there was a Betty Ford Clinic. And his celebrity status as a professional wrestler really helped spread the word, you know what I mean, about it. He had clientele come from all over the country, you know, to get help there and to dry out there. So yeah, there was definitely a unique aspect to it. And then not to mention having the professional athletes come too to train. So
Crazy.
Yeah.
So when you write we can talk about specifically about Dropkick Murphy, but it's more about all these books that you have to research, right? What's the typical process that gets you from inception of the idea and the research to an actual book that is you know, copy edit ready?
Well, I guess the first thing is you know, digging in and finding as many, you know, historical accounts, you know, photos. Photos are so key when I'm describing scenes of, like, you know, especially if I'm describing like buildings that aren't there anymore. You know, photos, news articles, first person accounts that people wrote in their own letters or letters to the editor of local papers.
So that probably takes a lot of time.
Tons of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can only imagine.
But I'm a huge history buff, so to me
So
it's fun, you know. And then tracking down people who can be interviewed, you know, whether they're experts or you know they were there and lived it, you know. Those are obviously the best interviews, and I was lucky enough to have a lot of those interviews, you know, be included in the book about Dropkick.
So when it came to the research, was there anything, were any of the experiences that you were researching and reading about, did any of them make you emote in any way? Could be happy, could be angry, could be distraught. Were there things in there that maybe, and maybe they didn't even make it into the book? You know, was there anything that hit you a certain way?
Yeah, you know, I mean, the whole entire book was, you know, dealing with, you know, people's stories, you know, people like really down and out, you know what I mean? Sometimes at the lowest point of their lives, you know, and talking with, you know, Dropkick Murphy's children about, you know, what they saw and experienced, and especially Dave Murphy. He was oldest surviving child of Dropkick's, who I was able to interview. He was so great. Like, we became friends, you know what I mean? We met for coffee regularly, and he was so patient too, because it took, you know, years for the book to come together.
Sure.
And finally get published. So, you know, talking with him about, you know, it's one thing when you're reading about, like, you know, wow, there was like a fire at Dropkick Murphy's and a couple guys, like, you know, got like hurt and like, you know, people died, you know, and he was there. Like, he remembered the fire.
Sure.
You know, and so interviewing him, you know, really, I guess, like, drove things home, you know what I mean? Because he had lived it, and it wasn't just all, you know, bad things. There was a lot of lighthearted moments, you know, from, you know, a lot of the guys had, you know, that I talked to. There was one, Bobby Byrne, who stayed there.
Very colorful interviews, you know.
Yeah.
To me, his interviews in the book really resonated. You know, like his trips to New York with family, you know, his family members having the same kinds of issues, all that kind of stuff was.
Yeah, but I mean, Bobby's an amazing guy, an amazing writer in his own right.
Okay.
And he's got, and also a great, he owns a restaurant in Mashpee.
Okay.
Highly recommend, if you're ever on the Cape, check it out.
Shall do.
Bobby Burns, yeah. So he was so clutch because, you know, Dropkick Murphys operated from like about 1940 to like 1971. So a lot of folks who had gone through the doors there, you know, had passed away. There wasn't like a lot of records. Like, remember, these are people who are going in, you know, for substance abuse treatment. You know, a lot of names weren't, you know, kept, you know, records were long gone. And Bobby, you know, had, you know, he was so generous to share his stories with me and his experiences at the farm. You know, one like kind of funny anecdote, this didn't come from Bobby, but it was kind of like a legendary anecdote that that really happened, was that, you know, I guess there were a couple horses at the farm, and one guy, a patient at the farm, they would be, all the patients wore red pajamas, kind of like uniforms.
Okay.
So if they wandered away, the cops would know it's one of Dropkick Murphy's guys.
Unless they were naked, they would be in a red suit. Okay.
And so this guy decides to jump on a horse and you know, took his pants off and just like went for a ride, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And practically in his birthday suit, and went to like a local liquor store. And liquor store like calls Dropkick, like, hey, I think like one of your guys just came here and like did like, you know, showed up on a horse. So
Sure.
that's just one like amusing anecdote. You know, the guy was okay. Dropkick was able to find him. They got
Sure.
the horse and the guy back safely. I assume they got the guy back in clothes again.
They got him as paraldehyde.
You know? Yeah,
Yes.
everybody loved the pracky, they called it, I guess. Pracky, yeah. And, that's what was used in the treatment of alcoholism, you know, at the time.
So that was the methadone of the time?
A sedative
for
of
alcohols?
sorts. Sure. And the guys were very excited to get, you know, when they were getting weaned off alcohol, sometimes Dropkick was a doctor himself, and his wife a registered nurse. And, you know, they were able to, you know, wean people off by giving them, sometimes when you first arrive, maybe a little bit of alcohol, and then eventually formaldehyde, which is, like I said, kind of a sedative of sorts. But the guys were always very excited to get it. And Dropkick's kids always said like it reeked, like it was like the worst smelling stuff ever. I've never tried it myself though, so.
But just to keep them probably from having the DTs.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah.
I'm sure back then that was probably one of the, you know, that main system the main symptom that they kept at bay, and they thought that was, you know, the one of the primary indicators, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol has a, you know, really detrimental effect on your whole entire body. And, you know, I think Dropkick's approach, you know, having like, he fed the guys a lot of like good home-cooked meals. I think there was a lot to do with like just the camaraderie, you know, of like being in a place where other guys are going through the same thing. And then obviously having the fitness equipment there and everything. I asked Dropkick's kids if like, you know, the alcoholic guys would use like exercise, workout, and they said, no, not really. They couldn't remember any.
Kept a separation.
It was kind of separate, but kind of not, like, because the guys would go over and watch, like, you know, prize fighters, like, training. Like, so they'd watch guys sparring in the ring.
Okay.
Well, they're just kind of, you know, a little bit out of it. So they got to, you know, see some entertainment, I guess, or maybe even be inspired by seeing, like, all this gym equipment and, you know.
Speaking of the physical activity, so let's go back to the beginning of the book. You got to research professional wrestling.
Oh, yeah. That was great.
So, talk a little bit about that. Like, were you a professional wrestling fan before that at all, or have you become one since? You know, when you were delving into those really unique stories of some of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, how'd that feel?
Yeah, so, I mean, growing up, like, when I was younger, you know what I mean, like, around, like, 10, like, I was, like, a huge fan of, like, WWE. I mean, it was called the WWF at the time.
Back then, yeah, sure.
And, but yeah, like, I was totally into it. And then, you know, when I became a little bit older, like, teenager, like, I, you know, wasn't into it as much. And so when I started researching what professional wrestling was like in the 30s and 40s, I had no idea. I was like, wow, these guys, like, you know what I mean, going at it for real? Is this choreographed? What? Like, but I was surprised to find out, you know, that it was there were a lot of similarities to professional wrestling of today, you know, the pageantry, the costumes, the nicknames, the crazy like drama storylines, that was all there in the 30s and 40s for wrestling. And you got to remember too, like there was no TV, not many people had TV back then, and you know, going to a wrestling match was like going, you know, to like the movies, going to a show, you know, and it's also a sporting event. And they drew, you know, the matches drew big crowds. It was a big thing back then.
What was the auditorium? Do you remember the auditorium that was in Boston? That was their primary auditorium that they used?
Well, so where
Was it on
Dropkick...
Columbus Ave or what?
Yeah, it's right on like Huntington, so the Mechanics Hall.
Okay,
Mechanics
Hall.
building.
That was right, yep.
That was a huge, I mean, it was that's where Dropkick got his start, one of the like kind of like bigger venues where he wrestled professionally under the name Dropkick Murphy early in his career. And right now, I mean, that's long gone. It was a beautiful building, though. The architecture was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's where the Prudential is.
Okay.
Now. So it was
Got
torn
it.
down to make way for the Prudential.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had mentioned this earlier in the interview about you basically teaching Ken about some of the experiences at Bellows Farm. So was him writing Sunshine Highway, which is part of the book that we mentioned in some of the last pages in one of the last chapters, was that the impetus of him writing that song, your conversations?
No. So Ken, you know, Ken and I, obviously, we talked a lot about Dropkick Murphys and Bellows Farm.
Sure.
Ken had an idea of, like, you know, that Dropkick Murphy ran a rehab place.
Okay.
You know?
So he knew
Yeah,
that
because like
information.
early on, you know, when the Dropkick Murphys were playing like places like, you know, really early on, like the Rat and stuff, they were making these T-shirts, and they were getting a lot of feedback from guys like in their 60s and 70s being like, yeah, you know, I was there, and then kids who are like, I was at the all ages show at the Rat, like what? Like this weird like convergence of people recognizing the name. And so he was aware. And actually, that's how, when they named themselves that, you know, I'm pretty sure Ken had heard about Dropkick Murphys being kind of like this, you know, like he had described it as like almost like, you know, this legendary, maybe even fictionalized place where people went to go dry out. Mm-hmm. But he didn't have like, you know, a lot of details of like where it was, like, you know, how it operated. yeah, so, I was excited to be able to like tell him and give him all the details about, all the prize fighters that like boxed there at Dropkicks and where it was located exactly down to like, the street address.
Sure. And how far is that from your house now?
Well, right now I live in Air, so it's not that
Okay, so
far.
you're not,
Yeah, it's like a few towns over.
okay,
Yeah, not far.
cool. When you were writing this book, did you have a certain opinion of Dropkick? And then at the end of it, was it strengthened? Did it change? Maybe speak a little bit about the author's intent for this book in general.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so when I started out, again, I had the idea that, okay, Dropkick Murphy was a professional wrestler, supposedly, you know what I mean? And, again, I don't know. And then he ran this rehab place. And, how much of it was true, I had no idea. And so, but the more I looked into his story, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, not only did he yes, he was definitely a professional wrestler. He wrestled all over the country. He made a good enough amount of money to buy a farm, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he continued wrestling even after he bought the farm. And yeah, he ran this very successful enterprise where he helped so many people, get off of booze at least temporarily, and also help train professional athletes and regular Janes and Joes, get them into shape, and for decades. So I was just like stunned the more I learned about him, like how he graduated from medical school, all 4 years, like, you know what I mean? And yeah, I was just more and more amazed the more I learned, because I was skeptical at first. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, did he wrestle for like a year? No, he had a very successful career as a wrestler. And so that was cool to find out, and all the guys he wrestled and everything.
Yeah, and he went to school on Newbury Street, so even then it was expensive.
Right?
You have frequently been on, true crime TV shows where you are doing stand-ups or giving particular individuals who have maybe done some very bad things, and you are one of those experts on those subjects. You've performed a little bit here and there, you would say. How did it feel when you came in and narrated a few sections of the audiobook?
Oh my God, it was so much fun, I'm used to like giving like kind of like guided tours about like, places where people were murdered or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Places where bodies were buried. And, I think it's an important aspect of history, all that, organized crime. But it was so nice to be able to write this book and record it and see the recording process with your company of how a great audiobook is made. Mm-hmm. So it was an awesome experience.
Good stuff. And having you and Ken in the studio on the same day made it such a wonderful time. And you guys were both very open, and I appreciate you allowing me to direct you a little bit. And it was good teamwork.
Yeah, no, it was so much fun that day, I gotta say. And hearing, first of all, being in the same studio with Ken, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, who obviously I've worked with before in the past, but never like in a freaking recording studio. I'm like, oh my God, wow, we're like using the same microphone. This is like
Sure.
great. But he did such an amazing job. Like hearing his voice, like was so smooth. I was like, wow, like I could hear like a lullaby. You know what I mean? From Ken Casey. Who knew? He did a great job, and you did a great job of directing us. And it was a really good experience. It was really fun.
So last question in this section. Have you listened to it?
I've listened to parts of it, and you did a great job. I highly recommend it.
I know, but it's hard. It's like listening to yourself. Like, even though I narrated it, it's still your stuff. So it's kind of like you can't. How long can you sit there listening to your own stuff?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's so fresh of me finishing it. I'll be listening to it like probably in full in a couple of years.
All right, so let's get into your origins, because this is the Origins series. So, hometown, high school, college?
Yeah, so born and raised in Dorchester. I got a dot rat tattooed across my back.
Okay.
The words dot rat, Old English lettering. I, for high school, went to Boston Latin School, go Wolfpack. College, Northeastern University, played hockey there.
You did?
For the women's team, yeah.
Great. How'd you do?
4 years. We won the equivalent of like the the biggest championship that was available at the time, the ECACs, when I was there. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that's where I majored in journalism.
So before we go further, being at Northeastern, was your co-op, did you have a co-op year, co-op semesters? How was your experience? Did you get good job experience in those particular semesters? So we can give Northeastern a little bit of a plug here.
Yeah. Co-op at Northeastern, I mean, it was an amazing experience. And honestly, majoring in journalism, it wasn't until I actually was on the ground, like, working in the Globe newsroom as a co-op,
Oh, great.
getting to see how it all worked. That's what made me really decide, like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. Like, so you are like the quintessential example of, okay, this works. This program works. This is why we have it this way. This is why it's different from everybody else.
Yeah, it definitely did for me, for sure.
So when did you know first that you wanted to be a reporter?
I mean, growing up, I was always into all types of media. I loved, like, drawing, you know what I mean? I used to love, like, doing, like, cartoons. I don't know if anybody read, like, Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spy. Like, I used to, like, make I used to always love, like, different types of media, you know? I used to have a big boom box that I'd record and do kind of, like, looking back, like, kind of like podcasts. Like, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Playing songs in between, interviewing people. And so...
Similar format.
Yeah, like I didn't really think about it, like, now looking back in hindsight, I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? It's not that shocking. I became a journalist, And I love doing something different all the time and meeting different people and telling, their stories and stuff.
You are a Boston Globe reporter. The Boston Globe is obviously one of the most respected newspapers in the world. So how is it working there when it counts, it matters? And then, like, what's a typical day for you at the Globe?
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, work for the Boston Globe, I mean, even from the beginning, as soon as I got hired, has been like a dream come true. And it still is. Every single day I walk through the doors. I know it sounds cheesy, but, like, I walk through the doors of 53 State Street and you're like, anything can happen today. Like, you know what I mean? Who knows what's gonna happen? And, and so I work the morning shift, so I'm like there 6 a.m. to 2, and a typical day can include any type of story. I might get sent out to cover, like, a court hearing. I might get sent out if something just, like, randomly happens, they'll send me out to interview people, knock on doors, cover press conferences. Other times I'm at my desk writing stories and just making calls on whatever the news is of the day. But it varies widely, so.
What's the most memorable thing that you've experienced so far?
Yeah, that's like a really, really tough question. I love asking that question. Being on the other end, now I know how
Sure.
it feels. I'm like, this is a nightmare. No, but there's just too many, like, to choose from. Like, a couple that pop out, like, in my head, while working at the Globe and writing for the Globe, I've been, chased by police. I've sailed on boats. I've actually, like, steered a boat. I've had the chance to, like, skate on the same ice as Nancy Kerrigan. I've had the chance to, like, I got to write about my experience playing against the Bruins alumni,
That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was, memorable for sure. It was, like, amazing to have, like, Bob Sweeney, like, you know what I mean, behind me while I'm in front of the net and just being like, wow, like...
A local guy, Bob
Yeah,
Sweeney.
yeah,
Sure.
and I was like, whoa, this guy's huge. So I've gotten to, like, cover so many things. It's just really hard to pick just one.
It's okay. Insider information on so I'm a Boston College graduate. I think my junior year, I was a bartender for the reunions. Bob Sweeney, it was his 20th.
Okay.
So I was his bartender that whole night.
Okay.
So he kept on coming back to me, even when the bar was closed.
Yay, that's
so
great.
I think I ended up
rapport.
like $120 just from him.
That's excellent.
It started something. So it got me to be a doorman in a nightclub for a couple of years. So any future, what are your future goals? Do you have short-term, long-term goals for both the reporter side and the author side?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to continue like doing great work for the Globe. I want to continue writing books. I love like working in like documentary films and TV. The Globe has a new TV show called The Globe Today, which airs on Nessun 5 days a week during the weekdays.
And it's not sports related? Is it just?
No, it covers all the different news that we do
Okay.
during the day.
Great.
And so that's been a really cool experience, like appearing on there and seeing my other colleagues work, in that format. So, yeah, I just want to continue, like, working in all types of media, like as I have been.
When it comes to that show, are they shooting that at the Globe or are they shooting at the Nessun Studios?
We have like a state-of-the-art studio right at 53 State Street in the
Cool.
Globe newsroom.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe we'll take a tour of it at some point in time.
Yeah.
We'll see. So when it comes to your true crime topics, you're dealing with a lot of dangerous people that you're writing about. Any of it ever concern you?
I'm not sure if it's strange, but no.
No.
I mean, I've interviewed all people have done all types of things, committed all types of crimes, and I just try to treat everybody individually. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Treat them as I'd want to be treated. So yeah. So far so good. Like knock on wood.
Sure. Treat them as humans, even if they've cut off a finger or two, or 5, or 10. And lastly, we'll finish with this because we care about the next generation coming up of these young people and we want them to succeed. If there was one thing you could tell the young people out there that you wish you knew at the inceptions of your career, that you didn't know but you know now, what would that thing be?
I probably right now like the journalism as an industry has been kind of like taking a beating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Definitely over the past few years, it's been getting harder and harder. Like I think to get a gig. I know when I came out of college, I was told the same thing. It's very hard. I mean, my advice would be if you really put your mind to it, you can do it. There are jobs out there. You can work for whatever publication you want and try to make as many relationships as you can. Get out there, network. Who you know matters a ton. And that's how you get your foot in the door. If places aren't hiring, that's okay. Ask for an informational interview. Give them your resume. I think that's also clutch. Get recruited before the job's posted. That's the way to do it. Yeah, that would be my.
The world will always need journalists.
Yeah, I hope so.
Always. A good world will,
Yeah,
right?
without a doubt.
Emily, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
Yeah, Chris.
An honor to have you here. I so appreciate it. If we could show the book off, Dropkick Murphy, A Legendary Life. So there's an ebook. There's obviously this is the paperback. There is a hard copy, right?
Nope, just paperback.
It's just paperback, okay.
Yep.
So paperback, and then obviously there's the audiobook. I may be biased to say that you can find the audiobook at leonardoaudio.com. Can't miss our title page, and please give it a listen. Anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Chris. It's been great working with you.
Yep.
So.
If you and you have 4 on the Floor coming out 2025.
Yep.
And we can't wait to get that to come down the pike. So thank you everybody for listening, and back at you in a bit. Leonardo Audio. Your story told right.